different is it preparing for a team that's had a change of coach during the week?
Well, you've got to be sort of be prepared for the unpredictable to some degree. And the other thing is, as we always do, we respect our opposition, and we've got no reason not to respect Carlton. Their performances this year have been really strong, other than a couple of games. They led Collingwood halfway through the last quarter. They've beaten the Bulldogs, pushed Hawthorn to 5 points down in Tassie. So on their day, they're a very, very good side. So we're expecting the best of Carlton, but we also know with a new coach there might be some things that they toss up that we haven't seen before, but we don't control that. We just control our own effort and energy, which has been the focus.
We know obviously you're close with Bolts. Have you spoke to him this week and had dealings with him?
Yeah, I have spoken to Bolts this week. We go a long way back. I coached him when he was a 16-year-old, and I was disappointed for him and his family that what happened earlier in the week. I think he's done a terrific job at Carlton. I reckon they're a team really on the improve, and it's just a pity that he hasn't got the opportunity to see it through. But he's a resilient person, and he's a great footy person, and somebody will snap him up somewhere, I would imagine. Maybe not in the senior coaching role, but in an assistant coaching role, and he'd be a great get for their club.
The obvious link would be to you.
We don't have any vacancies at our club at the moment, so that's a reasonable thing to point at me. But he's also worked with a lot of other people at the Hawthorn Footy Club who all know his talents. So I'm sure somebody out there will be thinking seriously about that.
When we talk about Carlton, Fish and I a couple of times have got stuck watching Patrick Cripps because he's such an amazing player, and there was kind of a unwritten rule that he was untaggable, and we saw on the weekend that a side manager, quell his influence. You don't generally tag that often, and your first choice for a role like that would be Jared Berry, who's not available. Do you look at the success other teams or that they've had and replicate it, and have you got a candidate or?
Yeah, I mean some teams have chosen to go down that pathway. I think GWS did a couple of weeks ago with Matt de Boer. Essendon did last week. It's been debated at match committee this week. There's different ways you could do it if you're going to go down that pathway. You could assign one player, or you could assign a couple of players. We've considered all those sorts of options, and we'll just see what we do on the weekend.
You seem to be, without knowing what your team is, a little bit horses for courses, depending on who the opposition is and how you might match up forwards and backs and whatever. Are you happy sort of keeping that fluidity in your team, or is it sometimes difficult to mix up a winning outfit?
I think as we grow and mature as a footy side, you've got to be able to adjust your team from week to week according to opposition strengths and weaknesses and all that sort of thing. So that's probably something that we're just going to introduce more and more. That's why you have a squad of 40-odd players. That's a consideration for us always.
Will it always be? That's a fascinating theory, because sides, you say you get to a point where you've got to be able to mix and match, but then the premiership sides historically manage to play the same blokes most weeks more often than everyone else.
Yeah, and that's the ideal. But and that's okay if you've got the personnel.
Yeah.
And we're certainly trying to develop those personnel. That's utopia. But with where we're at the moment, we're probably not that flexible in a sense. So we might have to change the team a little bit from time to time.
Yeah. Is it also that you don't deep down yet know what your best side looks like?
It's always a work in progress, I reckon, that one. And the answer to that probably is no, we don't. And it just depends who's in form and what you need each weekend a little bit. So we're probably closer to understanding what that is, but I don't think you ever quite get there.
Yeah. And what about the NEFL, when you're rolling sides? Is it providing a good enough environment for you to prepare those blokes to step up to the AFL?
Well, that's what we have to. That's what we've got to play in each week is the NEFL. And in recent times we played other AFL sides in the Giants and the Swans. So they've been good hit-outs. It's just that with our list at the moment, we haven't got a lot of injuries, and a lot of our guys are in good form, so they're playing really well. I mean, from a senior coach's perspective, I love for the games to be closer and tighter and a real test.
Yeah.
But that's not what we've got at the moment. The onus then is on our players to make sure that whatever they do, that they're playing at AFL standard and AFL level, and Mitch Harn's doing a brilliant job with that, just to keep the pressure on our guys not to drop their standards. And in a sense, it's a nice problem to have.
Noah Answorth, I just want to ask about him. Like I don't know what your expectations were when he came into the team, but how has he gone up against your expectations? Because he seems to get better and better every week, and he looks fairly well settled in that team. At the moment.
He's progressing really well. He's a great learner. I mean, every game he'll be able to tell you something that he learnt that will make him a better player next week. And he's hungry to succeed, and he really wants to stay in the side. So he's prepared to do whatever it takes, which is a fantastic attitude to have. I think it helps too. He's actually a 19-year-old when we drafted him, because he had a sort of an overage year in the TAC Cup due to his broken back. So he comes probably with just a little bit more maturity and a little bit more hardness in his body than the usual under-18 players.
What's the flexibility with him in terms of where he can play on the ground? Because the guys that seem the next wave to come into your side, a lot of them is halfback. Bailey, Starcevic played halfback when he was in the side last year. Allison's been in the best most weeks.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of that type.
Yeah, well, we're teaching those guys to play on the wing as well,
Yeah.
so that they can come in and help out in the midfield, and a couple of them got the capacity to go forward. So you probably don't get the chance to watch our NEFL team each week, but when they do play in a couple of different positions, just so they're ready for that when their AFL opportunity comes along.